Neil deGrasse Tyson has famously declared that science is true whether or not you believe in it. And of course, what he means is not science, but natural realities. That these natural realities and their causal consequences exist whether or not we accept them. Things like climate change or evolution. These are true whether or not we are willing to accept them. The problem is that the only way science has any value is if we engage with it, is if we do it, produce it, work in laboratories, and then create bodies of knowledge that informs the way that we interact with the world. Tyson conflates science with nature. Now, scientists have persistently applied this idea too far. They apply it to determinism, eliminativism, and atheism. None of these have been proven by science. At any rate, the opposite of what Tyson says about science might be correct about metaphysics. It's only true if you believe it. Now, of course, you're going to say, how could that be? That makes no sense. A fairy tale is not true just by believing it. Doesn't talking about reality imply that you're either right or wrong? This is the correspondence theory of truth, and basically says that we are checking to verify if our internal representation within our mind is the same as something external to it. But what if this model of truth is completely useless in metaphysics? This is exactly what I want to suggest. Metaphysics is an understanding of reality, and we understand it from our unique emplacement, our embodied perceptual and habitual patterns that make up our concrete and singular place within existence. This doesn't make it subjective or tied to our whim. Metaphysics relies on a certain method. It requires a radical break with our prior habits of thinking, perceiving, and understanding the world, and it requires that we take out of play temporarily our analysis and our effort at extracting advantage from the world, which is not necessary in science. In science, we can use our prior habits and we can use analysis and our attempt to extract advantage and continue to do science. But metaphysics, on the other hand, requires a radical break. The key to metaphysics is enactment of an untapped potential, or rather of generating a potential in ourselves, in our minds, in our consciousness that is not yet possible. Our own history, culture, and embodiment are the site of the birth of metaphysics, and it is not by completely erasing these, but by changing them and shifting them. And there is a radical break in the epistemology in understanding reality. Metaphysics seeks to understand aspects of reality that science and common sense cannot access. Science uses important methods like observation and measurement, and it cannot do without them. Science seeks to understand the actuality existing in the present by controlling it. We have to create a sort of artificial closed system, and this system must be free from contamination in order to control the effects going into it in order to predict the outcomes. It therefore deals with a segment of reality closed off from the rest of reality, and it deals with closed systems, parts, not wholes, effects and laws, not causes or intentions. Metaphysics begins with the study of the mind by the mind and proceeds by drawing more out of consciousness than it contains. It must build, transform, and even reinvent its own power of knowing. And through it, we begin thinking in a new way. And this doesn't just change what we know, but it changes our own life. And it opens possibilities that were not previously available. We find this in the history of music. Generations build on generations, and for the last 200 years or so, all new generations have leaped beyond what came before, retrieving much from their predecessors, only to surpass it and do something that no one expected. This continuous inflection and these discontinuous leaps in style, character, quality, pattern, etc., is a sort of emotional and intelligent expression. And the general contours of this evolving, changing history of music is the same general contours that we find within metaphysics, born from phenomenology of embodied perceptual intelligence and the metaphysics of habit, which I call the metaphysics of attunement. There is no eternal predetermined shape, but something closer to an attractor that potentiates its own unique infinity of potentials. And as any potential, as any kind of possibility is ingressed into a composition, it can have some of this infinite range of possibilities checked, and some of them augmented and transformed. Now, it's crucial to see that metaphysics is not in opposition to science. And there's a wonderful metaphor here of a telegraph. Messages can go in both directions on a telegraph simultaneously without interfering. So you can send a message from one side to the other side at the same time that the other side is sending a message to you, and both messages can get there without impeding each other. So too, metaphysics and science can coexist, both providing us with sources of knowledge coming from opposite directions, and yet complementing each other's powers. Science, with its unity in habit, common sense, and the production of technology, is a power to control movement. On the other hand, metaphysics, in line with invention and music, is a power to reinvent what sort of movements are even possible whatsoever. Just as the reality of nature and its consequences are what they are, regardless of our representations or our acceptance of them, we must engage in science and heed its findings if it's going to have any value for us. Analogously, metaphysics is really not about believing any kind of doctrine or systems, but rather is about enacting a knowledge production whereby we draw more out of our mind than it contains and make a leap in orders of magnitude into a new power of knowing that is not only knowledge, but is an inventiveness and insight into the unknown that pushes us into the future. Science must assume determinism and the laws of thermodynamics, the conservation of energy and the dissipation of energy. Metaphysics, on the other hand, must assume contingency and the laws of habit. And the laws of habit and the laws of thermodynamics end up being mirroring and being complementary to each other. Bergson goes so far as to say that the second law of thermodynamics is the most metaphysical law of science, and that it has certain imports for understanding life, evolution, and the role of consciousness in life. Science, by relying on observation and measurement, is retrospective. It looks backwards at what has already come to be in order to predict and control what can come of it. Metaphysics looks at what is coming to be, what is in the process of coming to be still, and it ushers in the unpredictable. Science without metaphysics has an endless potential for violence. It will grind us to bits as humans and will destroy our planet. On the other hand, metaphysics without science is a fantasy and delusion. Their continued separation and opposition is a major threat to human life and our understanding of our place in the cosmos and our ability to continue living on this planet.